Hello, people. Okay, if any of you guys are still online, that was a Wi-Fi issue, so I don't know if you'll log back in or you might have left. But I thought I'd try this anyway to give you another chance. I've just a friend messaging me on Facebook, so while I'm waiting for people to rejoin, I'll just respond to him. Hello. If you guys manage to rejoin, please just let me know you're here. Hi, Carl. Welcome. Um, we vote for parties, not prime ministers. I don't think that we should be copying everything that America does. Yeah, indeed. Well, we're not a presidential system. Then again, I do understand the optics of having unelected prime ministers. So I've mixed feelings on it, but I do agree we are not a presidential system. I'm going to see if the other guys managed to log in. That was a Wi-Fi issue. I should have mentioned that at the start. My Wi-Fi goes up and down in the evenings. So I thought rather than just leave it, I would start again. I'll see if Ray and Truth Searcher and the other guys manage to log in. Give it a few seconds. There's times I've pondered if we could, what it would be like to have a presidential system, and with all the recent royal events, I'm proud to be British. Actually, there's something about that ancient ceremony, and yeah, I think it's something special. And as much as I'm fascinated by American presidential history, it's I'm not sure that it would work out here really. Okay, I don't know. Maybe the other guys thought I just finished the live stream, or I'll see if they can log in. And if not, I may end this one. But hopefully, I'll give them a chance to log in. So I think I've enabled it. Carl, you've managed to write a comment, so I should have enabled it to be for people to write. I don't know. Maybe the other guys thought of the connection's gone, so they've logged out. That's a pity, because I think we could have had a good live stream there. Sorry, Carl. I'm just waiting for the others because I don't know what's. Maybe they've left. Interesting. I've just noticed there's a poll option. Yeah, the Wi-Fi can be annoying. It goes up and down, and sometimes it happens when I'm in the middle of a lesson, and I don't really know what to do about it. It's sometimes a maintenance issue. I have just noticed, literally just now. Thomas, welcome. Penny would have been a better choice. I quite like Penny Mordaunt. I think she is a serious candidate, but are you thinking because she was more of an outsider, Thomas? Is that what you had in mind? Because if that's the case, I'd agree. In the sense that she wasn't as tied to Boris Johnson, but anyone would have been better than Boris Mark II, in my opinion. Same with the other guys. If we could get enough people, I'm going to try and do a poll just to experiment to see how this works. But I'll wait a few seconds to see if someone else comes in. If you guys want to watch proceedings tomorrow, by the way, it's quite early. Usually, prime ministerial appointments are the afternoon, but apparently everything's happening in the morning. I'd say yes, more of an outsider, and seems she has the guts to really stand up for what we need. Interesting. I think Sunak will probably bring her into his cabinet. I can imagine. What would be interesting, I mean, it isn't going to happen. Jeremy Hunt's going to stay chancellor, but if it wasn't for the fact he was so new in the job and we need stability, an interesting scenario would have been Penny Mordaunt as the first woman chancellor. We've never had a female chancellor before, but I think a big role like that, or home secretary, maybe. Um, but Grant Shapps has only been that for a day. Do I have Virgin Broadband? No, I've got Sky. Sky is my Wi-Fi here. It goes up and down. Um, I'm going to see if any of the other guys who were in the live stream before, Truth Searcher, Ray Oric, if they drop by. If we could get a few people, I'm going to try a poll just to see how it works. I've never done this before. Let's see. I noticed the coverage on Indian news today was quite interesting. By Indian news, there was India today. They were saying a son of India rises over the empire and stuff like this. Who would you prefer, Boris Mark II or Corbyn? Oh God, what a choice! Ah, that is not a good choice. That's a terrible choice. But if I had to choose, cautiously, probably Johnson, simply because of his support for Ukraine and the fact he more or less got it right on foreign policy. I really do fear Corbyn's foreign policy. I think he's anti-West, but Johnson's corrupt, so that would be a terrible choice. Thankfully, we don't have that choice. I think at the moment we've got two relatively centrist figures in Keir Starmer and Rishi Sunak. So maybe actually we're back to kind of a degree of normality in that sense, where it's no longer populists. I mean, Boris Johnson is a populist on the right, Corbyn's a populist on the left, Starmer and Sunak are more centrist, so maybe we're back to a degree of normality. I think Penny would have slapped down just stop oil straight away. I hope Rishi doesn't ignore them. Yeah, I hope so as well. Of course, successive Home Secretaries have tried to push for action on this. Priti Patel, Suella Braverman. I personally think they need to be prescribed. I cannot stand them. And I'm genuinely concerned they're going to escalate into something more dangerous. But I think they need to be prescribed. What disgusted me, I actually came across a profile the other day. They were whining about the police methods in dragging them away from some site. I honestly find these people insufferable, but I've been quite clear about that in my videos. Yeah, I don't think Rishi will. There's some areas about Rishi Sunak I don't quite know where he lies. For example, on identity politics and wokeism, he hasn't said much publicly on those issues, which is maybe a good thing, maybe not. Um, Much of the Conservative Party, of course, is anti woke. In terms of crime and justice, I mean, Sunak's a conservative. I would like to think he takes a hard line, but there's some areas I'm not so sure what his stance actually is. I mean, the guy's only been an MP for 7 years. It's crazy to think he's 42 years old, 5 years older than myself, and he will be Prime Minister of the United Kingdom. Right, I want to do a poll, but we only have 3 people, so I'm not sure if it's gonna work or not. Um, I'm going to say, right, guys, I'm just Boris Mark II, I'm Widdicombe. I'm Widdicombe. I don't know what she's up to these days. I do think there's a risk that some Boris loyalists will try to break away and form a new party, which to me would be as absurd as Corbynites just constantly sniping away at Starmer, because all that would do is weaken the Conservative Party. So, and if they're Conservatives, it would be nonsensical. Okay, I'm going to try Welsh Punk. Welcome back. Is your internet okay, or is it a glitch in the matrix? I don't know how long, how much of this. And welcome back, Searcher of Truth. Um, yeah, 10 minutes. I was just explaining you guys it was a Wi-Fi issue, so apologies for that. But you haven't missed much. We've just been talking about what we were talking about. Hi, Nathan. Sorry, I missed the beginning of your video, but yeah, the person I mentioned about leaving the Tory party was a Johnson loyalist. I'm not surprised. Did you notice how Rishi ignored Matt Hancock? I didn't know. I did not notice that. Guys, if this goes again, it will be a Wi-Fi issue, just to be clear, and that sometimes happens in the evenings. Right, I'm going to do a poll because I haven't done this before. I'm going to see how it works. Let's see. Create a poll. Bear with me. Okay, I'll try and make this simple. Okay, let me try something. Oh, it's a yes, no. Let's see. I'm trying to think of a question to ask. Let's see. Be quite a simple question. So let's see. Um, okay, guys, if you can answer that, I just want to see how this works because I haven't done this before. So I'm literally just testing the technical side of this. Yes. Okay, so feel free to answer. And I don't know if the results are going to, I don't know how this works. It's literally the first time I've tried it. My own feeling is I don't know how Starmer will be feeling about this because I think Rishi Sunak's a very smart guy and I think he'll definitely be strong at the dispatch box. Um, I mean, Truss had the misfortune of her disastrous budget, self inflicted, of course, which kind of handed a gift to Starmer. But he might find that Sunak's a tougher operator. I don't know. And the circumstances might be different. The Tories might actually be emboldened and they might refine themselves, and Starmer may find a difficult time ahead. But you know, those hard leftists in his party who are making his job difficult, it's absolutely nonsensical. It's like they want Labour to stay in opposition. So yes, 50%. So this is like a live thing. I haven't. Just go click on it. Yes, 50%. No, 50%. Interesting. I personally think. Okay, I'll just end the poll. Thank you for voting, guys. I personally think. I mean, if the next election is up to let's say 2024, that gives Sunak 2 years, probably less than 2 years. Let's say it's summer 2024. That's not particularly long, but will be a lot longer than Liz Truss. Now, let's say the Tories win that general election. At the moment, it would be a real uphill struggle. And let's say there's a fixed term parliament. Sunak could be prime minister for 7 years. I think it's unlikely at the moment, but it's possible. I definitely think Sunak can take on Starmer. Yeah, I think Starmer will be nervous tonight, actually, because recently Starmer has kind of come alive. He's been very energetic at the dispatch box. I think he's done well in terms of what he has to do as opposition leader. But um, I think probably Starmer was hoping Truss would stay on. So the only thing that Starmer could bank on now is hoping that Sunak will mess up, come out with some disastrous policy, or the Tories will just be so divided that they'll destroy themselves. Maybe Starmer is actually banking on the Johnson loyalists to make a mess of things. I think Starmer wanted Boris back. Yeah, I mean, it would benefit him. I think the Johnson loyalists are so blinded by this support for one man, they cannot see the wood for the trees. They cannot. They cannot see that that would have been a massive liability. Now, the sensible Tories recognise that, and that's why Johnson didn't come back. So they've done the right thing. If I was a Conservative MP, I'd be have a sigh of relief that Johnson hasn't come back. But I think some of these Johnson supporters are just dogmatic, and they've got tunnel vision. Like, Boris was betrayed. We need to bring him back, and they're not really thinking about how the perception to the rest of the public, i.e., a lot of people were genuinely angry over Partygate. But like my friend today, he has the Johnson supporters who see him as a backstabber over Boris, which is a pity, as Rishi will be a better PM than Johnson. Yeah, I think he probably will. I mean, the whole pitch of Boris Johnson was this kind of folksy, clownish image, and it did work. It genuinely worked for a while. But then people just started to see sleaze, and they started to see a man who was taking a very serious job flippantly. I think Sunak will be a more serious character. Um, but I think he has the sort of communication skills that someone like Tony Blair had. So I think Sunak is not someone to be underestimated. But any big crisis could happen that could derail his premiership. I need to get some sleep. Okay, Carl, thank you for logging in. Have a good rest. The Green Party of England and Wales now backs Welsh independence. I'm not at all surprised by that. I mean, they were officially neutral on Scottish independence, but they certainly didn't speak up for the UK, which I thought was absurd because they were in 2015 and 2017 running to be, the UK government. I mean, not that they were ever going to win. That would be, a million to one shot. But I honestly don't have much time for the Greens in this country. The German Greens are more mainstream. The German Greens are still an environmental focused party, but they're more mature. They're just more electable, I think. The Green Party of England and Wales, and I suspect the Scottish and Northern Ireland sister parties are the same, they're just protest parties, in my opinion. They're not serious. They're just single issue protest parties. I mean, my goodness, they've got one MP and she's predictable. So I'm afraid I don't have much time for the Green Party of England and Wales, not to mention their official support for criminal tactics. I want Boris back, as at this point, I see the whole thing as a big joke until hopefully Labour wins in 2025. I actually think it'll be earlier than that. I think it'll be 24. I don't think it'll be January 25. I think it'll be at the latest summer 24. How do you feel about Catholics outnumbering Protestants in Northern Ireland? Well, I've grown up in England. Honestly, I've been here for 20 years, 22 years. So I don't have strong feelings on it, other than the fact that it will potentially change the political future of Northern Ireland. When that comes, if it comes, if there's a referendum on a United Ireland, at this point, it seems to be 50-50. It seems to be there's a reasonable chance that will happen. I think it probably will happen in my lifetime. I don't know. I mean, I'm not a hardcore Northern Ireland unionist. I mean, I'm British, and I think that Irish nationalists and nationalist community, they need to respect the fact that unionists feel a very, very strong, deep, sentimental connection to the United Kingdom and to Britishness. So they would need to be respected. It's sort of like history turning around. One of the factors behind the Troubles was that Catholics were discriminated against in the 60s and early 70s. I think some unionists might now fear that if there's a nationalist majority, they'll become marginalized and their culture will be discriminated against. So there needs to be mutual respect. And, it saddens me when I see teenagers rioting. These are kids who weren't even born after, when the Good Friday Agreement was signed. But honestly, I don't pay that close attention to Northern Ireland politics, as you might expect, because I've grown up in England. I mean, I'm Northern Irish. I've no problem saying that, but and of course, it's very important. But honestly, I don't microanalyze it, and I don't follow it closely. In terms of the change in demographics, I'm not surprised by it. Will it be a factor? Probably. But am I personally really bothered by it? Not really. I will mention one thing though. The actor James Nesbitt, who's in Cold Feet, apparently his house got vandalised because he attended pro United Ireland event in Dublin. So I knew that he actually grew up close to where I lived for 5 years in North Antrim. So there is still that sectarianism in Northern Ireland, unfortunately. I'm going to round this up soon, guys, because I'm quite tired. But let's see. Search of Truth. Definitely think he has Tony Blair qualities to him. Low. Thought that before, and it's certainly not a bad thing, I feel. Well, politically, I mean, people can say what they want about Tony Blair, but he was Prime Minister for a decade. He won 3 general elections. So I definitely see some of Blair and Sunak. Um, Thomas, I know an Iranian refugee who was in prison in Iran for protesting against the government, but backs the government and what's going on now. I can't understand it. He always has a go at Britain too. Let me get it straight. So he was jailed by the regime, but now backs the government. All I can guess is he was protesting over another issue. Maybe it was the Green Revolution or the Green protests in 2009. Do you know what he was protesting about? Because if he's I was going to say if he's a guy, he obviously is. He may have it may be a sexist thing that he thinks these women are out of place or something. I don't know. That's very strange. But yeah, I this isn't quite the same thing. But I helped a Thai woman about 7 years, 8 years ago now. Basically, she was a Republican, and Thailand, if you know anything about that country, it's neo-royalists. I mean, there the king is a deity, basically, and you can go to prison for criticizing the monarchy in Thailand. Anyway, in London, she was attacked by Thai royalists. Her house was actually vandalized, and this bothered me, so I made a video defending her. And then the Thai royalists targeted me. It was a whole thing. They're some of my most viewed videos. I have thousands of views. Anyway, I stood up for her freedom of speech and so on, and we kind of connected. And I yeah, we she thanked me for the support. Unfortunately, she has now become a real extreme leftist. She is constantly going on about the British Empire and evil lizard Liz when the Queen passed away. She was just coming out with some real manure on her timeline, full of conspiracy theories, like the most insidious kinds. She's pro Putin. I was so disgusted by it. This was someone who got refuge in the United Kingdom. She got basically asylum status, and now she's backing her enemies and speaking out against this country. So I was rather disgusted and disconnected from her. But that's people could go down that rabbit hole. Tony Blair without Iraq would be considered one of the better PMs. Yeah, I still think he's a great statesman. I think Iraq was a complete disaster, and it really is a pity because it overshadows his entire premiership. I mean, there's a lot to say about Tony Blair, but there's one thing I always point to in Kosovo. This is absolutely true. Young boys were named after Tony Blair. Such was the respect that he was held in Kosovo. These people were so grateful for Western intervention that they literally named their young sons after Tony Blair. And he and Bill Clinton got cheered when they visited Pristina after the war. Um, I think a statesman like Tony Blair cannot be summed up easily. There's so much happened in his premiership. I do think Iraq was a disaster. I protested against it at the time. It's just a great pity. But anyway, that's maybe for another video. I'm a bit tired, so but yeah, I totally agree, Thomas. I mean, his administration done some good things, and I just think people because they think of Iraq and they just evaluate his entire premiership through that prism. Ray, when I chatted to you on your previous live stream, you thought I was American. Yeah, I already responded to that, Ray. Sorry, maybe you didn't hear me. I did see that message. I think you left this comment on the last live stream before we got cut off. So, um, yeah, sorry about that. My apologies. I think I misunderstood because I think it may have come from. I think maybe you'd left a comment with something to do with the United States. I can't remember, and maybe I misunderstood. But I apologize for that misunderstanding. Belfast, to answer your question, it's nicknamed Linonopolis, or at least it was, just like Manchester was Cottonopolis. I'm not really sure what the nickname of Belfast is today. If Putin does a nuclear weapon, how should we respond? God help us. I don't think. I think if he goes down that path, it'd be a very grave thing. Of course, I think he might do it in the Black Sea, and he might use a smaller device. But any detonation of a nuclear weapon would just be really, really escalating this. How should we respond? I I actually disconnected with someone today because she was posting pro-Putin propaganda and she claimed that she was neutral. I sense a problem that's arising in the West where people are kind of getting war fatigue. So they're saying openly, why should we keep sending this money to Ukraine? We're struggling. But the thing is, this economic crisis isn't the fault of the Ukrainians. A lot of it comes from Putin's war. And my concern is this mentality of, well, we'll basically leave the Ukrainians to it. Let them defend themselves. It's their problem. But that mentality ignores the nature of Putin. He's not going to stop with Ukraine. The other thing that people should remember is Russia's already threatened this country, the Salisbury. So it isn't just about Ukraine. But yeah, I mean, I personally think as long as Putin is in power, Russia's a threat. There's no other way to look at it. Sorry to fire lots of questions, just interested in your opinions. Well, firstly, thank you very much, and thank you for being interested in my viewpoints. I appreciate it. These live streams can't work without that, without those questions. But I am a little bit tired, guys, so I'm going to round this up. But I'll do this again. I'll do the poll question thing. The good news is my troll hasn't shown up tonight, so I think he's finally got the hint. I might take down that video, which was a tribute to him, but I think he's finally got the hint. Ray, the eco activists are liking the 9-year-olds damaging properties. These are adults. They should get their act to get. Excuse me. They should act their ages. These eco activists need to be jailed. There should be consequences. Absolutely, but they see themselves as martyrs. The thing I think is most reprehensible about them is you have people literally tearfully pleading with them, saying they need to get sick children to hospital. And even then, they still continue and they threaten to continue. Now, that to me says they're sort of sociopaths. They actually have a contempt for society. I don't even like calling them protesters. I think they're criminals. I actually cannot stand them. And I think to date, the public has been remarkably patient with them. I think part of it is the police. The police have been far too passive. They should have taken far more action. My coffee's empty. They should have been far more robust early on. It was a disgrace that they were going, with the motorway protests. I think it was British Transport Police literally were asking them if they needed anything and giving them cups of tea. That was a disgrace. It's not the job of the police, and it only enabled them. I'm kind of done with the Ukraine thing after Biden said we're going into nuclear Armageddon. Don't think US allying our lives down for Eastern Europe is worth it to be. Eastern Ukraine is worth it, to be honest. Well, the thing is, firstly, I think that comment by Biden was foolish. I think it was a bit of a reckless comment to make. But it is Putin and his nationalistic mouthpieces that have been threatening nuclear war. And I think I don't agree that we should just sort of let the Ukrainians deal with it because Putin is not going to rest there. Let's say we just let Putin take that part of Ukraine. I mean, that would be like saying, okay, Russia invades Britain and let's just let them take East Anglia or Northern Ireland or Scotland. It would be asking the Ukrainians to sacrifice a big chunk of their territory. I just think that's very unreasonable. And not, I don't think any other country would be expected to do that. But even if that was a way to get peace, it's at what price? I mean, there's evidence that Ukrainians are now being deported into Siberia. This has echoes of Stalin's persecution. Um, yeah, it's expensive, but I honestly think I'd compare it to supporting Poland in 1939. I honestly believe it's like that. Would you back a UN referendum in Crimea and Eastern Ukraine on their status? Um, if it was UN backed, perhaps, but the problem is all of these Russian referendums are a complete sham because Russia has proven it's a lying regime. And, when you get Russian proxies that are intimidating people there, I mean, the 2014 referendum, I think, was a sham because pro Ukrainians were basically intimidated. And it's, I would not trust an absolute thing coming out of Russia. Um, but a UN backed referendum, yeah, but then it's a case of I don't know, to be honest. It would be a case of getting the UN on the ground, and then Ukraine would rightly say this is just coming about from Russian pressure. Why should we cede a large chunk of our territory when a larger neighbor has invaded us? And how can we do this under these circumstances? I think there's a lot more questions than answers. Um, there may be some sort of situation where Ukraine can say, well, let's have Russian speakers who we put into positions of power here or something. But the interesting thing about this is there are Russian speakers in Ukraine who would have been pro Russia up until the day of the invasion. Then they saw the nature of Putin. I mean, many Ukrainians speak Russian. I believe it's the second language of most Ukrainians. In many cases, it's the first language. So the two cultures do clearly overlap. But every Ukrainian worth their salt is going to put their country before Russia. So I just think expecting the Ukrainians to just give up their territory, it wouldn't be expected of any other country. So, um, no referendum should be legal without the agreement of the Ukrainians. That's in the UN Charter. I totally agree with that. I think just expecting the Ukrainians to just pander to Russian pressure would be obscene, especially given everything Russia has done. I always thought the Russian threats were hot air, but Biden really didn't help things with that comment. He didn't, but I think Putin's unhinged. I actually think, there's different stages of Putin. In the beginning, he was this cold sort of technocrat, and he was always an autocrat, always. But I think in the beginning, he was more stable. I honestly think he may be actually, I don't know, in the last few years, I think there is evidence that Putin has actually got a bit unhinged. That makes him extremely dangerous. Um, yeah. So, but I would not blame Biden for this situation. I mean, there's a lot of Republicans in the United States that are openly parroting Putinist propaganda, which I think is obscene. And I have to say, when it comes to Russia and Ukraine, I'm not neutral. I've made no secret of of the fact that I just don't think you could be neutral on this situation. And I think neutrality is favoring Putin. Okay, guys, I'm going to round this up soon because I am quite tired. About, by the way, the point about hot air, I agree, but it still shows us the nature of the Russian regime that you have nationalistic presenters on air casually threatening about wiping out British cities. I mean, this is grotesque. This is grotesque. Imagine if you had Hugh Edwards or the BBC saying, joking about flattening Volgograd or St. Petersburg, it would be grotesque. Um, and it just shows just how toxic Russian ultranationalism is. Okay, Ray, I know you hate the Jeremy Kyle. What do you think of Steve Wilkos as a presenter? Yeah, I don't think any better of him. I mean, what's Steve Wilkos's experience? He was a security guy. What has he ever taken a degree in psychology or psychiatry or counseling or anything like that? It's just, to be honest, I see it pretty much in the same light as Jeremy Kyle. I got a little taste of Steve Wilkos a few years ago, and it left a bad taste in my mouth. I sort of see him as an American Jeremy Kyle, so I don't think highly of him. You Edwards doing that, having nonsense on his show. Steve Wilkos is an extreme Jeremy Kyle. Yeah, an extreme Jeremy Kyle. That's saying something. I see Kyle is now on talk radio. So it kind of disgusts me that he still gets to enjoy these platforms despite everything that came out of his show. So I'm really tempted to call him up, but I'd have to, when you call a radio station, they ask you what you're going to ask. So I might just use a ruse and say I'm going to ask something else, and then put Kyle on the spot and ask him why he didn't show his face at a parliamentary committee. Whilst he played judge, jury, and executioner, he couldn't show his own face. The thing about Kyle, it's not that I had sympathy with some of his guests. I mean, there's some truly horrible people, wife beaters and criminals and so on. But the thing is, Kyle paid them. So he paid these people to appear on his show. Then he vilified them, stirred up his studio audience. The whole thing was obscene. Yeah, I'd like to. I don't have much credit on my phone right now, but it's tempting. If I do, I will mention it in one of these videos. Probably mention what transpired. I'm not neutral either, but if it means nuclear war between Russia and NATO, then I'd rather we stayed out of it and just support NATO countries. I do see where you're coming from, Tom. I mean, Ukraine's not in NATO, but I do think Putin's on hinge, and I just don't think that he's going to rest with just Ukraine. That's the point about this. Um, I mean, are we going to see World War III? Are we going to see a full blown nuclear war? Here's the sinister thing. When the Soviet Union existed, apparently Kremlin hardliners reckoned that nuclear war, they reckoned that if there was nuclear war, it would affect Eastern Europe primarily. And they actually reckoned this was the hardliners, that it was a price worth paying. If millions died, their logic was the world a big place. So if there was a nuclear war, it would affect that sort of region of Eastern Europe. We could sacrifice it. This was the mindset of Kremlin hardliners at that time. And what concerns me is there may actually be Putinists right now who are thinking, well, we we drop a nuclear device on a city, Kharkiv or Kherson or Zaporizhia, and there'll be international outrage. Russia's already polarized. There'll be international outrage, mass casualties. Um, but they'll probably bank on the fact the West will not respond in kind because then the whole idea of a nuclear deterrent hasn't worked. How would the West respond? I think it would have to be more than just sanctions. Perhaps a conventional bombing raid against Russia. I don't know, but I think that if Russia was to go down that line, the idea that we just think, oh well, we better not provoke them further. I just think morally that would be not an option. But doesn't mean we should go into full nuclear war. I think at that point, actually, Putin would there'd be a coup in Russia. I think that's what would happen because I think the disgust and the outrage, even in Russia, would be such that Putin would be removed. And I actually don't think it's going to happen because at the moment, Russia has very few allies. One of them is China. I think even China would be forced to condemn such an act. So I'm not sure if Russia would risk alienating the very few allies it has left. Okay, guys, I'm going to run this up. But a historic day tomorrow. We have a new prime minister. Um, uh, yeah, I'm going to do this periodically. But thank you for coming along. Thanks for your input, and yeah. Um, until the next live stream. Thanks a lot. Have a good evening, guys.